Welcome in to a very important and somber episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and when I last talked to you, I had just finished recording this week's episode of The Racing Report. I sent it off to be edited and went to bed and went home just like I would any other week. But unfortunately, the next morning, I woke up, looked at my phone, and saw that Kyle Busch had been hospitalized due to what his family was calling a severe illness. And unfortunately, later that day, we learned that Kyle Busch had passed away at the age of 41. It was an incredibly difficult decision for myself to do this episode today. I didn't know the right way to do it, especially since I had teased on Wednesday, just less than 24 hours before Kyle's unfortunate passing, that we would be talking about the Indianapolis 500 this week in a very special episode of the Racing Report that was entirely dedicated to the 110th running. And unfortunately, today, I need to amend that plan. Today, we will be discussing Kyle Busch and remembering Kyle Busch before we finally preview the Indianapolis 500. So the first half of this show today is going to be in honor of Kyle Busch, a two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, the all-time winningest driver across all of NASCAR's top 3 series. There will never be another person like Kyle Busch, and there will never be another NASCAR driver like Kyle Busch. His impact to the entire world of motorsports will never be forgotten. And as we remember him, we also must remember the family he leaves behind. Samantha and Brexton and Lennox, but also his brother Kurt, who himself was a fierce racer, and arguably had it not been for him, we might not have ever been graced with the greatness that was Kyle Busch. Both Busch brothers, unfortunately not able to dictate the ends of their careers on their terms. Thankfully, Kurt is still with us today, but we do wish him the best as he deals with arguably one of the most traumatizing events of his life. And as we remember Kyle Busch today, it's important to look back on his career and just how we got here. It began in 2001 at the Indianapolis Raceway Park when Kyle Busch made his NASCAR debut, driving for Roush Racing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, driving the number 99 that his brother Kurt had piloted just a year before. But unfortunately, after finishing 9th in that IRP race and then running 5 other races, Kyle's career was put on pause. And not because of anything he did wrong, but merely because he was too young. He was 16, racing at the California Speedway in 2001, during the same weekend that the Kart Series was holding their season finale in Fontana, California. The sponsor for that race? Marlboro. And as a result, Kyle Busch, just 16 years old and not of legal age to smoke or use any type of tobacco, was escorted out of the track and told he could not return. But that never stopped Kyle. Kyle would never let that type of setback put him behind the 8 ball. In fact, he came back even stronger in 2003, winning ARCA races before he finally returned to NASCAR, and this time in a full-time position when he got to drive with Hendrick Motorsports in 2004 to take over the number 5, which just 1 year prior had won the championship with Brian Vickers behind the wheel. Kyle would go out that year and win multiple races, including the race at Indianapolis Raceway Park, en route to a second-place finish in the Busch Series standings. Later that year, Kyle Busch moved up to the Cup Series to replace Texas Terry Labonte, arguably one of the most legendary drivers in NASCAR history. Kyle went into those shoes and filled them as best he could. Kyle would win 4 races during his tenure with Hendrick Motorsports, with his first race coming at the California Speedway the same exact track where he was kicked out back in 2001. Busch followed that win up a couple of weeks later at the Phoenix Raceway with his second career Cup Series victory, but then went on a little bit of a cold streak during the 2006 and 2007 seasons. He did win one race per year, but ultimately his time with Hendrick Motorsports was coming to an end. As Busch left, in came Dale Earnhardt Jr. to replace him, but that's all right because Busch landed on his feet, taking over the number 18 ride at Joe Gibbs Racing from J.J. Yaley and inheriting a brand new Toyota with a brand new sponsor in M&M's. The 2008 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series for Kyle Busch was nothing short of a fairy tale, at least until the chase started. Busch won 8 Cup races in his first race with Joe Gibbs Racing, and it looked like he was bound to win his first Cup championship. Before the first 2 races of the chase, Kyle had horrible luck crashing out and having mechanical problems, and ultimately not being anywhere near championship contention. But that's okay, because by 2009, Kyle Busch's winning was just getting started. He came back to Indiana, where he made his first NASCAR Truck Series start, and went all the way up to the Winchester Speedway in 2009, where he won the Winchester 400, cementing him as one of the greatest late-model short-track drivers to ever grace the pavement. Busch then followed that up later that year, following a dominating season in the NASCAR Nationwide Series, to win his first NASCAR championship of any kind. He won the 2009 Nationwide Championship and then springboarded himself into 2010, where it was arguably one of the biggest at the time seasons for Kyle Busch, pulling off the hat trick, the trifecta as it was called. Busch won all 3 races that were held during the weekend at Bristol in the fall. Busch won the Truck Series race, then followed it up by winning the Nationwide race, and then won the Cup race. No one had ever done that before because no one had ever thought to do that before, but Kyle was different. Kyle didn't care what the situation was. As long as he was in a car that could potentially win the race, he was going to drive the wheels off of it. And nothing showed that more any so than what happened later. He won the inaugural race at Kentucky Speedway in 2011, a track that he had won at plenty of times in the lower divisions. And in 2011 as well, in 2012, he was part of arguably one of the most fantastic finishes in all of NASCAR history, when he was in the lead before getting spun by Brad Keselowski, to which set up an incredible finish between Keselowski and Marcus Ambrose. Kyle will now forever go down as being a key part in that race, in a last lap that so many NASCAR fans, myself included, just can't get enough of. But it wasn't there. It didn't stop there. As the next-gen car came out, Kyle Busch adapted just fine, winning plenty of times in 2013, including a thriller at, again, the California Speedway, where his teammate Denny Hamlin and former teammate Joey Logano came together on the final lap, losing with Hamlin and Logano both losing control, allowing for Kyle to slip by and score the win. As things continued, Kyle Busch, again, finally, he came back to Indianapolis once again in 2013. And during that time, he entered the second Nationwide Series race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and took home the victory, doing burnouts across the yard of bricks and celebrating his first win at Indianapolis, not knowing that it would be the first of many. However, in 2015, Kyle Busch had another setback. At Daytona in an Xfinity race, which had recently become the titlement sponsor after the departure of Nationwide, Busch was involved in an accident at Daytona International Speedway, which resulted in him breaking both of his legs. Kyle's recovery was nothing short of substantial and almost miraculous. Busch missed just 11 Cup Series races before returning to the track and continuing his winning ways. In 2015, he won his first Brickyard 400 and followed it up by winning the NASCAR Cup Series championship in 2015. It was his first in the Cup Series, and while some argued whether or not it was deserved based on the format of the championship, no one could take away the fact that Kyle had persevered when everything was against him. When the odds were stacked against him, Kyle said, "I'll take that bet." By 2016, Kyle Busch returned to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and once again swept the weekend. He became a two-time winner of the Brickyard 400 and cemented himself alongside names that will go down in the history of auto racing as some of the greatest to ever do it. In the following years, as Kyle Busch's tenure went on, he became part of the Big Three in NASCAR Cup Series racing. Along with Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex Jr., it seemed like those three drivers were the only ones who ever won a race during 2017, 18, and 19. What's so unfortunate about all of this, and I think Jeff Gluck put it the best, is that it is an unfortunate finish to an unfinished career. And that's the only thing you can say about Kyle Busch and what happened this week. And the reason I say that is because when you look at Kyle Busch's stats, they will probably never be replicated in the history of NASCAR. In 2021, Kyle Busch won his 100th career NASCAR Xfinity Series victory at the Nashville Superspeedway. He had 2 more races left on his Xfinity Series calendar and won them both, bringing his total number to 102. In the Truck Series, Kyle Busch was equally as dominant and equally as fierce. Everybody remembers the 2011 incident with Ron Hornaday at Texas, but what a lot of people don't remember are how many times Kyle Busch made those truck races something to watch. Even if he was dominating and even if he was winning by 5 seconds, there was something about a Kyle Busch victory that just felt special, as if you were watching history unfold right in front of you. And we learned that just this past weekend, when Kyle Busch won his 69th and what would ultimately turn out to be his final NASCAR Truck Series race at Dover. And of course, the quote that is living and ringing throughout all motorsports fans' heads is that he didn't know when it was going to be his last and to cherish them all. Kyle Busch has his career taken and cut short, owning the most wins in all of NASCAR at 234, a number that should have continued to grow, while he raced alongside his son Brexton, who turned 11 years old earlier this week. He is also the all-time winningest driver in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, formerly known as the Xfinity, Nationwide, and Busch Series, as well as the all-time winner in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Kyle Busch won the pole for this year's Daytona 500, but will never hoist the Harley J. Earl. It's a somber reminder that life is precious, and life is important. And no matter how much we love to hate a driver or how much we hate to love a driver, we must always remember that what they do entertains us at the end of the day, and what they do seeks greatness. Kyle Busch sought greatness, grabbed it, and then tried to get even better. Kyle Busch will be remembered not just as a fierce competitor, but also as NASCAR's most polarizing but popular personalities. And no better way to describe that is in my one and only experience with Kyle Busch. Despite being a fan growing up of his, when he won the Brickyard 400 in 2016, I asked Kyle if he would ever consider following in his brother's footsteps and running the Indianapolis 500. To which Kyle told me, a young 20-year-old reporter, in his first ever Brickyard 400 media session, that he would not follow in his brother's footsteps, but he would rather forge his own footsteps. While it has been recently revealed that Kyle Busch had multiple opportunities to run the Indianapolis 500, it is ultimately the greatest shame that we never saw Kyle Busch do as his brother did and run the Indianapolis 500. But in some ways, that's okay. Because I think the legacy of Kyle Busch is not founded in IndyCar, but rather it is what he did for the world of NASCAR. And for that reason, Kyle Busch will never be forgotten, and he will always be remembered. On behalf of everybody who works on the Racing Report, I am sending my sincerest condolences to the Busch family. He was not just my favorite driver growing up, but he was also one of my favorite drivers to cover as a journalist. And having the privilege to cover his career is something that I will always cherish. Just like Kyle said, you never know when it's going to be the last one. We'll be right back with the Indy 500 preview on the Racing Report. Welcome back to the Racing Report. I know it's been a very somber episode so far, but as Steve O'Donnell said just this Friday afternoon, Kyle would be mad if we didn't go on racing. And so on that note, the Indianapolis 500 is this weekend, and we do have a race to preview, and I am going to hold up my end of the bargain by promising that to you. On lap 18 of this Sunday's Indianapolis 500, the scoring pylon will go up and tribute Kyle Busch. And I hope that everybody in the stands takes a moment to remember what a great driver and an even better man Kyle was. But before that, we have 33 drivers aiming to win the Indianapolis 500. And the man starting first is Alex Palou. Now, as I transition into this, I will talk a little bit quicker, try to get through things a little bit faster, and try to keep things a little bit more upbeat than they have been. Like I said, Alex Palou starts on the pole. It's his second Indianapolis 500, and I usually wait to do these kinds of previews until Carb Day, because practice and qualifying can be very unpredictable, and often are not a direct representative of how a driver or a car will perform during the race. But Carb Day is usually the best indicator of that. And when I say that, Alex Palou definitely looks quick. Not only did he win the pole, but he was sixth fastest on Carb Day. And that has to be giving that reigning champion a pretty good boost going into the rest of the week. But alongside him is going to be Alexander Rossi, who, as we talked about earlier this week, was involved in a terrifying practice crash on Monday in which he had to have surgery on his middle finger and has had his leg in a cast ever since. But Rossi was able to get behind the wheel and run about 48 laps on Friday. And what ended up happening was, I think he was just getting used to the car, getting used to the pain that he's probably going to feel across 500 miles. So he was only 31st quickest, and it is a backup car. So from that reason, I think we should all taper our expectations on Rossi. I think he will probably drop to the back or about mid-pack at the beginning of the race unless the car feels strong to him. But again, that's just my opinion and what I think is going to happen. I think that's the best for Rossi. Just kind of feel it out, see how it's going to be, because it's a long race and you don't want to lose it because of some error or pain or something in the early laps. But also starting alongside Rossi is going to be David Malukas, who I also think has a really good shot at a victory on Sunday. It's his first ever Indy 500 start for Penske, and he finished second, well, technically third, but second officially, last year during the Indy 500. He could be one to watch on Sunday. I would be looking for the guy coming from the outside of row number one in David Malukas. I think that's a really good pick. I can't really say I have any faults with it. He definitely looks very strong, and I'll be very curious to see how he does throughout the race. Elsewhere in the field, again, let's talk about Felix Rosenqvist for a hot minute. I think Rosenqvist is a driver that is another Not sleeper, not dark horse, but somebody I don't think many people are going to pick. I think everybody has their favorites, but I really think the speed that Rosenqvist showed during qualifying is important, and it's going to factor into the race. That 60 car is very clearly fast. Now, did it get the best track conditions during qualifying? No, so he's going to start fourth, but regardless, he has the speed. And the question is, Rosenqvist has been somebody who very well has been in the mix to potentially win an Indy 500 in the past, but has been snake bit by bad luck. My question then could that bad luck have already passed, and now could this be Rosenqvist's year to maybe get one done? We'll have to find out during the race on Sunday, but I'm very curious to see how he'll do. Now, the other guy that's probably the fan favorite is Pato O'Ward. Everybody kind of expects at some point O'Ward is going to get that victory, and his stats speak for themselves. O'Ward has plenty of top 5 finishes, top 2, top 3 finishes at the Indianapolis 500, and he's in an Arrow McLaren car, in fact, one of the fastest Arrow McLaren cars. His teammate won at the Grand Prix earlier this month. Who's to say it's not possible? I think Pato has a ton of experience, and I really do feel like for those Pato O'Ward fans out there right now, it could be your year. It very well could be your year. But the Speedway picks who wins. And maybe this is the year for Pato, maybe not. But I think that when that win does come, it'll be even more sweeter because of how long he had to wait for it. And let's talk about somebody who had to wait a really long time to win an Indy 500, Takuma Sato. As we all remember in 2012, that fantastic finish where he tried on Franchitti on the last lap, spun and crashed, but then rebounded not long later, won the 2017 race over Castroneves, won the 2020 race, and now is in contention again, I think, to potentially win another one. He was super fast last year. He's been kind of quiet in practice all week, but qualifying and carb day was really impressed me. So Sato might not have the fastest car in qualifying trim. He starts 12th on Sunday, but he was 5th in carb day practice. And that, I think, is going to be the key because Sato, he has a car that's set up in race trim. And I think that race trim is probably one of the quickest. And he's got plenty of experience. No matter how much faster he is than his RLL teammates, I think he's going to be the one to watch. He's going to be the veteran that could very well get another victory. And I don't want to count out Scott Dixon either, because I think Dixon very well could be also another veteran. But it seems like Dixon's week has been very quiet as well, whereas Sato's has made a little bit more noise. Ultimately, I like Sato's chances for potentially getting win number 3 on Sunday. But let's also talk about someone who could get win number 2, Will Power. Will Power is racing his first Indy 500 for Andretti after running basically his entire career for Team Penske. This is only the second Indy 500 that Will Power has run where he wasn't driving a Team Penske machine. If you remember in 2008 when he made his first start at Indianapolis, he was in a KV racing car. Now he's in an Andretti car. Well, and Andretti, for the most part, has been pretty good at Indianapolis in the past, but this year, they don't seem that great. Kirkwood, Ericsson, and Power have all been kind of mid-pack at best. Not super important. Not super fast, not super relevant on the timesheets, but I don't think that's necessarily bad. Power starts 19th. He was 26th quickest in carb day. Obviously, he's working on race trim, and that's important. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, Will Power is somebody who has a lot of patience, and as long as he doesn't get snake bit by the bad luck that he's been having pretty much this entire year so far, I think he should be okay to potentially get a good finish on Sunday. But then, let's talk about the drive for 5. What about Helio Castroneves' chances? Me, personally, I'm going to turn the dial down a little bit more. Castroneves has a very fast car, but not the way that maybe I expected. He's starting 14th, and he was 19th in carb day, There could be a chance that maybe Helio gets 5, but I have a strong feeling that that's probably not going to happen this year. But of course, Helio's probably not going to quit until he gets 5, so expect him to be back to try again next year, even if he doesn't win this year. Newgarden, let's talk about him, though, real quick. Penske cars are a little bit weird. Newgarden, McLaughlin, and Malukas are spread out through the starting grid, and it's really hard to tell exactly who has what. Malukas looked very quick in qualifying, not as great in carb day. Maybe, even though all the Penske cars were in the top 10. That is something important to note as well. But Newgarden was fastest. And of course, Newgarden's going to say, it was just a lap, big deal. But that kind of bodes well for me when you're talking about race trim. He's coming from 23rd in the field. Newgarden might have a pretty good shot at working the draft to get to the front and win a third Borg Warner. But then the question then becomes, how does he do it when he's out front? I think they've got the car probably pretty well set up to run in traffic. But once he gets out front, how's that car going to perform? What's the fuel mileage going to be like? We know that the Chevrolets get slightly worse fuel mileage than the Hondas. That could come into play as well. These are all things that we'll have to watch when Sunday rolls around. But the number one thing I think that most of the state of Indiana is going to be looking at is Connor Daly. Connor Daly, I think, would be the perfect dark horse sleeper pick in this Indy 500. Dude, he's starting 8th. He was 4th fastest in carb day. And last year, Dreyer and Reinbold was very well in contention to win the Indy 500 until the very end. I look for Connor Daly to be up front most of the race on Sunday. And elsewhere, let's talk about some of the rookies real quick. Dennis Hauger was the quickest rookie on carb day, though he starts 29th, which is not good. Kyle Collette was originally the highest qualifying rookie, but of course got moved to the back after that penalty. I'm actually curious. I think Kyle Collette could be someone who could work his way through the field to get a very solid top 15 finish. I mean, it's going to be hard coming from the back when you clearly had a car that was top 10, that was capable of a top 10, but I do think in this case, I think Kyle Collette could potentially be our Indy 500 Rookie of the Year, but I am not going to count out Hauger or even Mick Schumacher. Schumacher has been leaning on a lot on Sato, which is his teammate this year, ran with his dad in Formula One. I think that Mick Schumacher should not be counted out for potentially Rookie of the Year. Now let's talk about Catherine Legg in our final couple of minutes before we have to go. Catherine Legg is doing the double. Of course, she'll be running the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte after the Indianapolis 500. There is some rain in the forecast. It could potentially derail those plans. Legg is committed to running the Indianapolis 500 over the Coca-Cola 600. Team owner BJ McLeod will not be in Charlotte. He will actually be in Indianapolis, but they do plan to have a backup driver for Legg. And I think the number one thing for everybody watching Catherine Legg here is to keep your expectations grounded. Legg has a very great opportunity at finishing both races if the weather holds off, and I think that ultimately she will succeed at doing that, but the likelihood of her running all 1,100 miles are slim. She is not in the fastest car at either race, but her goal should be to finish, and I think that is a very easy goal because that is something that she can do very well. Overall, my pick for this Sunday is going to be Alex Palou, and I think he's going to get his second Indianapolis 500 victory and win 2 in a row. That is it for this week's episode of the Racing Report's special edition. Thank you again to everybody who tuned in and watched. We look forward to a fantastic Memorial Day weekend, and we remember Kyle Busch as he will never be forgotten for the impact that he had in all of our lives. For WTHR Plus, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been the Racing Report.